All right, so brother, we're live, and I'm just gonna get into our queue.
There's a land just off the Atlantic, land of jungles, waterfalls, and sweet scenery, where poor people farm the lands and hunt the waters, and all live in peace and harmony. This is Guyana, beautiful Guyana.
Well, good evening, colleagues, and welcome to today's conversation in our nation-building Guyana 2030 and beyond, co-hosted by the Guyana Business Journal and the Roraima Learning Trust. We're joined by Kojo Paris and Stanley Ming, and Kojo will introduce Stanley in a proper manner in a few minutes. But I just wanted to set it up for today. Our topic is on reclaiming Georgetown, on drainage design and development. And it sort of returns us to the challenge as old as the city of Georgetown itself. And it's one that remains urgently unresolved. You know, a decade ago, the Moray House Trust hosted a pivotal lecture by civil engineer Bert Carter, who reminded us that the drainage of Georgetown was once guided by thoughtful engineering, a disciplined understanding of hydrology and functioning civic apparatus. So his reflections on cokers, canals, conservancy dams, and the once integrated system of sluices and gauges highlight a truth we continue to ignore at our peril. Georgetown is a city that lives precariously and at below sea level, and its future depends on as much effective drainage as on energy revenues or political capital. And I wanted to start today's conversation by just taking a short peek at, uh, at some of the talk that Bert gave some years ago at the Moray Trust. So, with your indulgence, a little bit of Bert Carter talking about drainage in the city of Georgetown. And I want you to look at the slides very, very carefully. Look at the dates on the slides.
This is Carmichael Street at Bishop's High School. This is beautifully kept canal looking towards the railway station. And you can see the width of the canal. Next slide. This is looking at the other end of Lamar Street, looking back now. You can barely see St. George's Cathedral in the center of the roundabout. Next slide. I show you all these slides to show you that you hear about these things, but to actually see pictures of them is to know that they did really exist. This is Camp Street. Camp Street from Lamar Street looking back that way. Why? Because you see that chimney there? I'll show you something about that chimney just now. And I'll tell stories about that story about it. Next slide. There's the chimney. This is the waterworks. Now, for people who know me, I turned center one a couple of days ago. Tuesday, was it? I don't know. Yeah. When you get to my age, two things happen to you. One, you don't remember anything, and two, I don't remember the other one. No, but I remember as a young boy growing up in Rock Street, I remember these structures right in the edge of the pavement in Camp Street, which is now the new monument site. But I put this in to show you that as of 1867, you can see there's a canal in Camp Street. This is by Church Street, looking down towards Lamar Street. Next. Now, this is interesting. There's that same chimney. So now we're still up by New Garden Street, looking down the Lamar Canal, and you can see the chimney of the waterworks. So I'm giving you these ideas so you can see there were no bridges at all. And that could be verified because the tramcar came up Close Street, came into New Garden Street, continued along New Garden Street, and turned into Third Street or Crown Street, and came back again. Next slide. And this is the first bridge across linking the two where the tram line came. And this is even after the tram was expanded, so it was after 1929. The more older folks will remember this is the first second address for the local radio station, Radio ZFY. And this is where the Fatima Church is. Now, why did I show you all this? Next slide. To show you how things have changed. This is looking east up Close Street, outside the Law Courts. And this is an animal-drawn tram. So you know that it was before 1891 because electricity came to the city in 1891. But the point I'm trying to make is that look, this channel is concretized. It's concrete. It's a concrete channel that we know existing today. And it goes all the way up to there. And every channel from Embikoko is concrete from the river to High Street. But we, after 100 and how much years, I can't even count. We build another inch. Not another inch, but we can talk about it a little later. Next slide. This is really the canal, and right in front of Commercial and New Building Society, you see it bends the water and pours the water into this canal on here, that is John Finance Canal. You can barely see the library in the foreground. And you know it's after 1909, but it's before 1937 because the library is only one floor. After 1937, the library became 2 floors that we know. Next. Also, when the rain fell in Georgetown, some would end up in the channel, some would end up on the vats. And here you see these vats. I just guesstimated if this was a vat that's 8 foot to the top, 10 foot to the bottom, and 8 foot high. It's over 4,000 gallons. It's a smaller vat. Next one. This is at the corner of Middle and Main Streets, southeast corner, in a big open lot. Next. Well, I don't plan to make anybody engineer out of this, but I just want to give you some idea. Let's say a typical canal at 20 feet at the top, and a depth of 6 feet. There's really no real depth, because you could jump in there, as we used to do around there in the border, border pasture, not border view, border pasture. You could jump in the canal and catch the bottom one. And the bottom would be about 6 foot bottom width, and because of the stability of our place, they didn't want to exceed the angle more than 30 degrees. So there's a typical shaped canal. That canal will go 78 square foot in cross section. And all these canals, as we said earlier, was half a mile long. From Church Street to Lamar Street is half a mile. Let's smile a little less if you discount the streets. So the length times the area is the volume if you convert it to gallons. We have Main Street, Michael Street, Waterloo Street, Camp Street, Thomas Street, 7.7 million gallons of water. Next slide. But if you look at Commonsburg North and Commonsburg South, Commonsburg North being bounded by Lamar Street, Commons Street, Middle Street, that's Commonsburg North. Commonsburg South is Middle Street, Commons Street, Church Street. Those 2 acres add up to 204 acres. That's 30 square feet. And because of 1.5 inch rain in 12 hours, that'll give you cubic feet, 30 gallons. You end up with 7.652 million gallons. Don't forget, what we traded off in the 6th Avenue was 7.7. I often wonder, what is the relevance? Because is it by design or is it by choice or just an act of God? The amount that we surrender is almost the same amount that would fall on the area. Now, you may argue that this is not a very factual case, but it wasn't intended to be that. Some will end up in vats, some will end up in soak in the ground, some will disappear by what they would call evapotranspiration when the sun came out. But I thought it was very interesting, and I thought I'd just include some little bit more data, like 310 house vats. If some of these had vats, I did a calculation to show that if 100% of the people in Queenstown had vats, 90% in Albertown, 75% in Commonsburg, 40% in the rest of the city, then the amount of water that would be stored was as though we were able to say 18% of the total rainfall in 24 hours. Which is a lot. Anyway.
Well, I thought you guys would welcome a thought on, historically what has happened here, and I'm going to throw this to you now, Kojo, for what you guys have been doing in this context.
Prof, thanks a lot, and good evening to fellow nation builders. Welcome to another edition of Nation Building Guyana Beyond 2030. And we're very pleased to have, once again, by public demand, Stanley Ming back on. Stanley, after your last program, there were lots and lots of requests for more details, more information for us to dip a little deeper into some of the issues you mentioned. So welcome back.
Thank you, Kojo. And
Karen. Yeah. So this evening, what we want to do, Stanley, is to start off with drainage. Guyana's been experiencing the usual seasonal deluges, and very quickly things get flooded, places get overwhelmed by pools of what would follow as stagnant water. So I understand yesterday you went around and you did a little video of what the current state was. Let's have a look at that video.
The main problem that plagues the drainage of the city of Georgetown is the fact that the outfall areas are all clogged up due to lack of maintenance, and this has been going on for decades. As you can see here, the Kawan Street outfall drains the entire northern section of Georgetown all the way from Vincentian Road to Water Street, and from Middle Street all the way to the seawall. And you will observe that the canal itself, which is supposed to bring the water all the way west, is at a high elevation that is at least 6 foot lower than the outfall, which is totally clogged up. As a result, they have installed pumps which are about maybe less than 5% the capacity of the actual coker, and in this case here they've installed 2, but that does not compensate for the loss of the flow if the coker was operational.
Because the canal is not digging, how much years now, make the water rising up on the government in front of Main Street. Then make the water is up there. Since the canal dig, since the water line is gone. Canal is door now, but 8 months now. See? Just because water not actually like that. But over the bridge with the water there. Not water there over the bridge. But once they dig, you have to pull the water out. Really like for this dig. Get a nice flow. See?
Many years ago, there was a gentleman that his name was Hoppy. I don't know if he's still alive because he's quite an elderly person. And Bert Carter, who was a former city engineer back in the 70s, himself, Hoppy, and myself did a complete survey of all the drains from the Vincentian Road all the way to Water Street, and from the seawall all the way to South Road, and a little bit beyond that, and the same problem. But there was a very clear diagram. I don't know who has it now or if the records are still there, that showed you where all the drains were interconnected under the street, so that they could have kept the maintenance. But all of those drains now that go under the street are all blocked. So there's no way for the water to run towards the main drain.
Thanks a lot. Stanley, here's part of the challenge I have. I've just returned from a little birthday treat in Japan and the Philippines. And in both places, there was lots of rain. I never saw an overflooded drain. And the Philippines is a relatively poor country. We saw from Bert's piece that there was a system which was put in place long ago to manage these issues. What has happened, and who's responsible?
Well, Kojo, I'm not going to be pointing fingers at any specific person or persons, but as a citizen of Guyana, and more so as a citizen of Georgetown, I am embarrassed by what I see whenever the rain falls, because people coming to Guyana cannot understand why such a small area does not drain. And as Bert pointed out, the only reason is lawlessness. I'm not going to blame the city council. I'm not going to blame the government. But what I can tell you is that the general citizenry of this country are lawless. you have situations where you go on the seawall on a Sunday after all the liming or whatever you call it, and it's littered with garbage, right? They don't use the receptacles. The ordinary people, they just throw it on the ground. I don't know who they expect is going to pick it up, right? In the case of Georgetown, the business community, again, many businesses around Georgetown have covered over the drains that are there, and there's no way you can access it to clean it. But they did it again for a very selfish reason. In some cases, I can tell you, I wouldn't say exactly where, but if you drive along, you can observe it yourself. Some entities have filled in big canals that lead to cocas and covered it over to establish their business. So even if the city council wanted to clean it,
They can't.
they can't, right? Or if the Ministry of Public Works wants to clean it, they can't. So it is a general lawless behavior by individuals. I mean, I was driving one day along the bypass in Kitty, and I was right behind a very fancy Mercedes-Benz, and I couldn't believe it. Down came the window, a box and plastic bottle out the window. I drove up, and when I saw it was both the person and I was shocked.
Yeah, but Stanley, part of what we do on this program is to identify challenges, and then we try and map solutions. So we have a problem. We have a drainage system which doesn't work, and it's probably a little bit of a metaphor. And every time there rains, there's a flooding problem. How do we solve it? You've spent a lot of time, both in your professional and your political life, thinking about these things. How do we, as we approach 2030, as we get these huge amounts of revenues, how do we solve and address this problem?
But what I can tell you, Kojo, and I'm not guessing here because Bert and there was a guy by the name of Harpo, who was at the mayor and town council, and he and I went around at the turn of the century and identified all the bottlenecks, and it was shown to various people who were in authority to do something about it. But very little, if anything, was done because of what I just said, drain being covered over. But if we are serious about it and we want to fix the problem, we can do it before the next rainy season. The first thing that has to be done is all the outfalls from Kawan Street all the way down to Sussex Street and beyond, where you come to Houston. You clear those outfalls. You got to start at the exit into the Demerara River, and you work back. And if you put teams to clear the drains and get the people who cover them over to remove the structures they put over it, and you clear them, by the next rainy season in November, December, the city will drain.
Yes, but this needs a lot of coordination.
I am prepared to show whoever, whether it's the Ministry of Public Works, the people, or the city council, because I'm one of the fortunate people that was able to see with Bert and Harpo, who was in charge of the city council at the time, what the bottlenecks are. If I took 2 days, I could show anybody what is bottleneck and what needs to be done. Very easy. And you put several teams together, a few hundred people, with their proper equipment, protective wear, with the tools to clear all of them, the city will drain. Now, I know that the government is prepared, or they're talking about putting in the new types of drains, which is the precast concrete, in the future, but it can be drained even without that. What the precast drains will do is to make the drains a little bit narrower because the flow will be faster. But the existing drains will do the job if they're clean. But if I challenge anyone, or say to anyone, drive on Quamina Street from Camp Street to Cumming Street, and on halfway on every block, there's a drain that leads between Middle and Quamina, and between Quamina and Church Street. If you go at Bishop's High School and you look, you can't see any drain because there are trees growing in the drain, not just debris. Or you go to the next block between not Thomas Street, Waterloo and Carmichael, look at the same thing, block. You go from Waterloo up towards East Street, same problem. And that's every block in the city.
But tell me this, Stanley, and we don't want to be pointing fingers, but what needs to be done and coordinated by people who live in the city, and they go to work every day, they go to the restaurants, etc.
Yeah, well, again, in my case, I had the problem here in my premises. But what I did, I got people, I paid them, they cleared it, my premises didn't flood. Right? And if you go, you can find my drain. You can see it right from one end to the other.
Yeah, you've shown me.
Yeah.
But are we asking everyone to do this individually? That's not practical.
Well, the thing is, I think the business people can afford to pay people to get it done around their businesses. And if everybody does that, it wouldn't take them more than a week to get it done around their own premises. And if everybody does that, it's fixed. But the government has to do it out for
Right.
whether it's the city council or the Ministry of Public Works or both of them. I don't know what the arrangements, if the city council has enough resources or whatnot, but if we want to fix it, we got to do it collectively. Everybody has to take responsibility.
So effectively, you're calling for government, the business community to get together.
And the private individuals who throw garbage out their windows all the time.
But you refer to that challenge as an issue of lawlessness.
It is lawlessness.
So how do we address that? Because none of what we're talking about works if we have a lawless society.
Well,
how do we address that?
Well, you know, they're fine for littering. I mean, the same people who do what they do here in Guyana go to New York and to Canada, and I don't think they throw bottles and chicken boxes out the windows of the car. There are laws and they're enforced.
So this is an enforcement issue?
And also discipline. Right? I mean, the indiscipline in this country now is unreal. I mean, the roads in Georgetown are absolutely crazy. I mean, I'm terrified to drive the road.
Yeah, well, I don't drive at all. Yeah. But Sandy, let's huddle around this issue of lawlessness and how we behave towards each other and as a community. We've got a generation of young people coming through. How are we going to ensure that their vision, not only their visions and their needs can be met, but also how are we going to get them aligned around these issues?
Well, you know, the sad situation with that is a lot of our young people continue to leave.
What, sorry?
Continue to leave the country. Mm-hmm. And the chances of getting the ones who are well qualified to contribute at this present time to designing systems and educating their peers and their colleagues, right, is disappearing because there are no incentives for them to stay. They have problems of getting a piece of land to build their house, or to be able to get financing to start a little business, because those systems do not exist.
Wow. You know, I'm a little bit overwhelmed, Stanley, because we seem to be excavating layers of challenges. There's the broad systems which are meant to implement, to construct and maintain our infrastructure seems to be not working. The various parties who are meant to do it don't seem to be coordinated. And the young people who are meant to underwrite the future, we're saying that there's also a challenge there.
Yeah.
What is the way forward? How do we get past this?
Again, it's not an overnight job or an overnight challenge. Let me just give you some stats, right, to tell you where we are. In 1960, the population of Guyana was 560,000. In 1970, it was 745,000. 1980, it should have been 992,000. 1990, it should have been 1.3 million. In 2000, it should have been 1,736,000. In 2010, it should have been 2,305,000 people. 2,305,000. In 2020, it should be 3.1 million. And in 2030, it should be 4.083 million. We're not even a million. You cannot develop a country like Guyana with 1 million people. This country right now needs 2 million more people if you were to take advantage of the opportunities that are presenting themselves.
Sani, if you know, we have so we're raising another dimension of the challenge, both the quantity and the quality of human capital.
Right.
But we already have issues about people saying that, you know, the Latinos, the Venezuelans, etc., are a problem.
Well, again, you know, we have a short memory, most of us. I remember back in the 60s and the 70s and even the 80s, Guyanese families left this country in droves. they went to Canada, they went to the United States, the Caribbean, and many of the ones that couldn't go to the north went to Venezuela, Puerto Ordaz, Guyanese families. And they were received, they were facilitated with jobs, they were facilitated with education, medical services. And when things got bad in Venezuela within the last few years, a lot of them came back. And the stupidity of ourselves is to say we don't want them in Guyana. I mean, obviously you don't want criminals, right? Because they're coming to do mischief. But I have met many of the people that have come back, right? And they all have Guyanese heritage. The majority have Guyanese heritage, mother or father. And when you speak with them and realize, just a couple of months ago, we were delivering some big pipes, those pipes that we use for drainage. And there was a guy on the truck that was directing the operations of loading it. And John, our CEO, went down and spoke to this guy, who was very logical in what he was trying to accomplish in loading. And he said to the guy, you know, you don't strike me as a laborer. You know, what's your background? He's a medical doctor. But you know what? He does not have the requisite paperwork to be able to work in the profession. So he's going every day, running around wherever he can get a hold on, as we say, to do work. But I will say to the government, and I will give Minister Ben credit, because there were 3 young ladies that walked into my office more than a year and a half or 2 years ago. They were all with Guyanese heritage. And 2 of the young ladies came to this country with $20 in their pockets. And when they tell you their story, it was horrifying. And the one young lady who brought them, who was Guyanese also, she had a laptop computer that was not working. And she went to all the computer stores in Georgetown, the well-established ones, and couldn't get it fixed. And these 2 young ladies who were highly trained in their respective fields, one was in anything electronic. They had a little Facebook page on social media, and she picked it up and she went to them, and in half an hour it was fixed. She brought them here to show me who they were, and I had a problem. And I said to them, can you fix it? And they said yes. She started to put on equipment on her head, on her ears and stuff like that. I thought she was a doctor. And within a matter of minutes, she had the whole TV, which was one of these smart TVs, stripped down, and she diagnosed the exact part that was faulty. And I said, well, how do we fix it? And she said, well, I have a supply source out of England. It's going to cost you X dollars. I can order it, and within a week to 10 days, it'll be here, and I will install it at this cost. So said, so done. I called Minister Ben. I told him, look, we got people from Venezuela that we need to assimilate into the country. And he invited them, and he did all the research that needs to be done to make them legal.
Right.
Right? They were subsequently given the necessary paperwork and recognition so that they can establish a bank account, register a company, and now they are both working and fixing a lot of things that we could not have fixed before. And there are thousands like that, and we need to accept them and bring them into the fold and let them be a part of the 2 million that we need to get more within the next 3-4 years. Not a long time, or else we're not going to achieve any level of development. You cannot develop this country with 780,000 people. Not possible.
And Stanley, I hear you also saying that we need a much more logical and clear and transparent system to bring the kind of skills and resources we need into the country.
That's easy to do, right? Look, United Arab Emirates, Dubai, the population, the last time I checked it, which was a few years ago, I mean, I went there several times in recent years. Their population, when they found oil, was less than 500,000, or just about 500,000 people in 1970. They invited the British, the Germans, the Americans, you name them, that had the experience about oil, to exploit the oil. And they invited all of the Western countries to come with technical expertise and says, you develop this industry, but you must teach our people, right? And today, there are over 10 million, I think 10.8 million last week I saw.
In the Emirates, yeah.
In the Emirates, and 1.3 I think are Emiratis, and the other 9 point whatever are all foreign. And that is the best system I've seen with reverse colonization, in the sense that the Emiratis are in all the nice air-conditioned office. Their parents sent them to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Oxford, Cambridge to learn all the modern skills. They are designing the future of the UAE, and they have the Westerners out in the sun building the infrastructure. And today, as you know, they depend on oil for 2% of the GDP.
Yeah, they've diversified significantly.
Completely. Right? So all we need to do as a country says, hey, we need to get 2 million people over the next 3 years. Okay? And these, you don't have, like what is happening now, I come to Guyana, I said, I want to build airport in the middle of the Essequibo River. Right? No. When I went to Singapore in 1987, right, I went to the Hyatt hotel in downtown Singapore. And I wanted to find out how you invest in Singapore. They sent me to a floor on the Hyatt, that's the business center. And I said to the young lady there, what areas of business is Singapore looking for investment? She gave me one sheet of paper and said, IT, this, that, the other. And she said, if you're interested in any one of those, we have all the incentives for that to show you. I said, yes, I'm interested in IT. She gave me another folder, and I looked at it, and they said what specifically they were looking for, right? What was the data
right.
centers and stuff. And then she said to me, if you are interested and you want to set up a company, these are the legal firms that do that. And I can have one of them over here within a half an hour, right? I went into there at 9 o'clock, right? And I looked at it, and she said, if you want, I can call them over. And after you're done with those guys, you can then see the areas that we have office spaces, warehouses to set up your operations. And if you want, we can set up with the companies that own them to lease it to you,
right.
Rent the office to you. And by 3 o'clock, you can be out of the country. So from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock, you can do everything. Now, that's what you're competing against.
And how are we doing? Because we've got entities like GoInvest, etc., GoInvest, etc.
I'm not going to comment.
No comment. Stanley, you're not going to comment on that one. But Stanley, let's pivot back to something you mentioned, which intrigued me: the issue of diversification. Because we were built by sugar. Our nation was built on sugar. What's happening there, and what should we be looking towards in respect of the sugar industry as we go towards 2030?
Well, I just read today's papers earlier today, and Christopher Ram did a very concise articulation of sugar. And let me tell you what it says. In 1940, 85 years ago, sugar production in Guyana was 155,800 tons. In 1960, 20 years later, it was 327,000 tons. In 1981, it topped 300,000 tons. Between 2005 and 2015, it declined to 230,000, never crossed it. In 2024, it was 47,130 tons. And the first crop in 2025 was 15,000 tons. So that is the actual production. Now, I was very enthused by what both the president and the vice president said recently, which I have the pieces of paper here. The vice president indicated, let me just get the date here because it's all here.
Stanley, You're overwhelmed with information.
Yeah, no. The vice president in May 2022 said, government tells IFL sugar workers to look for other jobs. And they did. A lot of them came out of sugar. They started their own private cash crop farming. Some went into fishing and stuff like that. And then June 17th this year, the president said that Gaisuco will expand its role as a hub of rural economic development. He proposed leveraging its land, infrastructure, and skilled workforce to support other crops like rice, corn, and cassava, as well as livestock operations, agro-processing, and engineering services. He declared a future of crop diversification, skill diversification, income diversification, with plans to co-invest with workers in new economic activities, creating tens of thousands of new jobs. And the chairman of Gaisuco now, who is a friend of mine, I know him very well, before he became the chairman in August of 2024, he said that Gaisuco recorded losses of 7.8 billion in 2021 and 10.2 billion in 2022. So that's an average of 9 billion a year. So if you take 3 years of losses, right, you're going to have $27 billion. If you have 10,000 sugar workers and you were to each work it out, you have to sit down with them and sit down with people who understand the dynamics of business and say, listen, for each of you, we will give you an incentive of 2 acres of land, and we will give you $2.7 million of seed capital, provided you meet the following criteria. And you go into farming of the crops that are high value.
Cash crops.
Right? But I guarantee you, when I went to Taiwan at the turn of the century, I was being shown around Taiwan. I saw the big building where sugar is normally like what we have at Rumbell. So I said to them, but you're not growing any sugar. You stopped that, decades before. They said, yes, that's where we put the sugar that we import. Because the sugar that we were producing is so low in value that we've gotten out of that, and all the farmers that used to do that are now cash crop farmers shipping produce to mainland China, Thailand, Malaysia, and they're all doing many times better than when they were sugar workers. And I will say to the government and whoever, you give the farmers of this country an incentive, piece of land, and they said they're going to provide loans. In less than 2 years, the whole agricultural landscape of this country will be transformed. And the president's idea of setting up Eureka with the processing and with the cold storage and the shipping to the Caribbean, that will take off like a rocket, right? And it won't need the government to do very much other than to facilitate the farmers with the resources. They will get themselves out of that.
So, Stanley, is there somewhere we can see this as a plan? Is there a coordinated?
But what I'm saying, Kojo, I'm just throwing out ideas because when I go to countries, I don't go to see tourist sites. I go to see what makes India so successful within the last couple of decades in agricultural production. They're way up there now, right? Malaysia, same thing. Thailand, the same thing. I go to see what it is that they've done. And all I'm doing is sharing with the Guyanese public what can be done. Now, it's a question of whether the people, the government, are interested in sitting down and working this out as a collective. It is not fair to expect the government is going to fix everything. Each of us got to do our part.
Absolutely.
But what the government has to do is to recognize that they don't have all the answers. Right? They have to sit down with the farmers that are trying to develop themselves and say, hey guys, don't tell them what to plant. Tell them these are the products that we ship out to the river.
Right.
These are the incentives we can give you. Right? And the farmers will tell them exactly what they want. And hold them accountable. And if they don't produce with the incentives they're given, take back the land. Right?
Stanley, your thing about looking at examples when you travel is where things have been done properly. I've experienced that because the other day I was in the Philippines and you directed me towards the development outside Manila, where they're literally rebuilding new cities.
Well, not rebuilding, they're rebuilt.
Well, it's an ongoing process, but yes.
Well, we have to build more because the population.
what is the lesson for Guyana from that? Because I know you're very skeptical of a continued development in the current Georgetown environs, given what's happening with climate change.
Well, again, it's not rocket science, Kojo. You know the report that was presented to Guyana several years ago, and there's a lot of stuff now online that several cities, including the city of Georgetown, can be underwater by 2030. Now, the fortunate thing about Guyana is less than 2% of our land, the 3,000 square miles, is on the coast.
Submerged,
right? So it's not a case that we don't have land. And Guyana has enough land for the whole Caribbean to be to be housed here. But the thing is, when the British were here, they were here to plant sugarcane. So it was not in their interest to move in from the coast because the soil was perfect along the coast. When we got independence in '66, and we had the future to plan, we did not move away from the coastal plain, right? Except in the case of Linden, we had the bauxite there, which was also started by the colonial era. But what we need to do now is to look at what it is we have. And there was a study I told you was done and presented to the government in 2003. There's an area just across the river from Bartica that is the size of Trinidad and Tobago. It's 1,300 square miles. And in less than 10% of it, all of Guyana can be fitted. And it's way above sea level. It has all the resources to do agriculture, aggregates, because all the quarries are in the Mazaruni, the sand, right, and the water. We don't need to have wells in Guyana. If we took and didn't pollute the Essequibo River, the Mazaruni clearly, and collected that water and processed it, we can supply all of Guyana without a single well.
So, Stanley, I mean, because you're hitting me with a lot of very powerful information here, and I'm trying to figure out if we could do all of these things, or just a fraction of them that you were talking about, Guyana could be transformed.
Guyana can be the envy of the world, not the Caribbean, right? But again, I'm saying, a government, whichever government it is, cannot sit down in their offices, right? I don't care who it is, and decide what the future will be. We have to be a collective. Singapore is what it is because the people of Singapore were involved in all the decision-making process. And it is not a question of whether, the people should be involved. Article 13 of our Constitution, we always talk about the law, right? It says here, the principal objective of the political system of the state, and this is the Constitution of Guyana, right? Of the state is to extend socialist democracy by providing increasing opportunities for the participation of citizens in the managed and decision-making processes of the state. Are we doing that?
You tell me.
Again, I'm not going to comment. Right? Everybody knows what goes on. Right? So it's a question of, are we going to grow up? Are we going to become mature? Are we going to work towards a win-win situation where one set of the population feels they're excluded? Or are we going to say, let's bring everybody in? This cake is big enough and has enough potential to make all of us extremely wealthy, extremely comfortable, and extremely productive. The question is, as a people, are we prepared to do it? At every level. And I will stick a further pin. It is the responsibility of whichever government is in office to reach out to the rest. Right? Because they have the hand in the steering.
The levers of power.
Right? So I am just saying to every one of us, all, let us stop the nonsense. Let us think carefully. How can we make this pie be one that all of us can enjoy? And not just a few. That's the secret.
Well, Sammy, it's not a secret anymore because you've just shared it. You've just shared it with us. But we end up at the Constitution. So what is it that we need to be doing? Because all that you've told, I mean, if I were to try and summarize what you're telling us, is that literally we need to put our heads together, and we need also to make sure we deliver on a consensus plan. So what do we need to change? What do we need to amend as we approach 2030 about the Constitution?
But the Constitution has almost everything we need. The question is, are we practicing what the Constitution says? And you know, I tell everybody, you have a country, and this is, I mean, everybody knows, you have one half of the society pulling this way, right, and the other half pulling that, right? What are you going to get? Right? They're divided, and there's no amount of painting over or talking is going to change that. That's the way it is right now. What we have to work towards, as I do in business, when I negotiate for business, right, which I do very often,
A lot.
I negotiate for win-win. I don't want to win and you lose, right? Because you're not going to be happy. But I tell people, if you negotiate that you will win and I will win, we will succeed. And I've never had a case where I try to outsmart anybody or because I make my position very clear from the outset. I want an arrangement that you will win and I will win. And that's always been the case. I've never taken anybody to court for anything. Because I deal with you as an equal, irrespective of what nationality or religion or anything you are. Right? Because I see people as equals. I'm no better than anybody.
Stanley, I know you're trying to avoid the issue of politics, and I understand and respect that. But you spent time in politics. You worked with former President, late President Hoyt, very closely. What were the lessons you had which could help us as we move towards 2030?
Well, let me tell you. In 1990, the president then, Dr. Jagan, came to me. I just started my business. And he came to me, I was just renting the Dr. Plaza far from the Mendez.
Right.
And he wanted to buy some motorcycles, Yamaha that I represented. And he wanted to know if I could give him a discounted price, which I arrived at in 2 minutes.
Okay.
And then he asked me if I could give him some credit. Because
you obviously knew who he was.
Oh yeah. I have a lot of respect for Dr. Jagan. He's an excellent human being. So I told him I couldn't because literally I'd opened my business a month before, right? And then he said to me, I hope you're going to vote for me at the upcoming election because these motorbikes are for the campaign.
Right.
Well, I could have said yes, but I didn't. I told him no. And then I went out.
You told him you're not going to vote.
I'm not going to vote for him.
Okay.
And then I said to him, Dr. Jagan, he was a doctor in dental. I said, you know, everything I know about you from people who know you very well, Miles Patrick, David Carey, and others, are that you are an honest individual that means the best for Guyana. But it says you represent communism as an ideology. And that was the time when Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union, and Cuba had totally disintegrated. So I said, on that note, I cannot support you. Right? Who said, say that? He spent 1 hour, and I listened very carefully of his brand of socialism and communism. At the end of it, I said, Dr. Jagan, I still am not convinced. Right? And he left very peacefully, he shook hands.
He bought the bicycles.
Well, when he left, he said to me, I wonder if, you know, I should have said yes. But I couldn't fool him, right? Because I respected him. And I said, you know, let's see what happened. A few days later, he sent the order. But that was not all. 5 years later, for the 1997 election, there was a meeting at the headquarters of the party, and they talked about buying more bikes. And everybody talked about every bike about except the bike I supplied. And Dr. Jagan said, but you know, we bought bikes from the Yamaha guy, and as far as I know, we got good service. And we will give him the order again. That's the man. Right? He never held anything against me. He knew I did not vote for him. Right? But that is the man.
There was no vindictiveness.
None whatsoever. And we became very close friends. He sat in my office after he became president. with Dr. Ivor Mitchell and Sam Hines, and stayed more than an hour and a half talking about Guyana 21, how we need to develop Guyana. And a few days later, he and Major General Joe Singh, at the time was Chief of Staff, was flying over, and he was pointing out to Major General where we should put the bridge and everything.
Right.
And he said, "Why didn't we do it? Well, the rest is history.
The rest is history, as they say.
Now, let me tell you about Desmond Hoyt. People say I'm PNC. I was never PNC. I was the leader of the reform component that came together with young professionals, including Peter Ramsaroop, Supriya Singh.
This is Peter Ramsaroop from Going West.
Yeah. Peter was a part of reform.
Okay.
Right? And he was very active when he was with us. And I met Mr. Hoyt as president at, up the road here in High Street one night. And he wanted to meet with young people and professional business people because he was campaigning. This was in 1990.
Right.
For the election, which had been postponed to 1992. And everybody was saying, Mr. President, we need to fix the roads, the potholes, we need to fix the schools. Some of them are terrible, and we need to get the schools with better teachers and everything. And this went on for about 20 minutes, by which time my blood was boiling, right? Because I think a lot of them were soft-soaping him.
Right.
And I said to him, Mr. President, let me be frank with you, right? I'm a businessman. Where I come from, there are lots of excuses, right? If you go to the worker, he tells you, my supervisor told me to do it this way. If the supervisor says, my manager told you to do it this way. And when you go to the manager and he tells you, the CEO told me that way, the buck stops at the CEO. So I said to him, I said, Mr. President, you're the CEO of my country. I want to know what you're going to do about all the things that were said to you here tonight. Right? And I can tell you people over there, Cathy Hughes was there, Nigel Hughes was there, and several other people who are in the system now.
Right.
Were all there. And I just said to me, that man should lock your control with the team because you were very aggressive.
Impertinent.
To deal with him. And I told him in no uncertain terms, I said, Mr. President, right now what we're having instead of free education at school is free ignorance. Because the level of competence of teachers leaves a lot to be desired. And then I told him about computers. I said, computers in this country are considered electronic goods, which attracted taxes 70%. So I said, if you want to change what is happening in education, give the people who can afford to pay for private education the opportunity to start back sending your children to private schools. I said, computers which are electronic, remove the taxes, zero rated, right? So that everybody can own a computer rather than those who can pay the higher price. And that was a Thursday. On Friday, he called me, his office. The president wants to see you. Well, I wasn't going to go and apologize for anything. He was in his office with Dr. King.
Right.
I arrived there, and he said, Stanley, last night when you were together with my wife and I, you said certain things, and you were very, very to the point.
Candid.
Yeah, and I want to tell you that you were correct.
Right.
And he said, I'd like you to work with me and whoever else you have within your group to help us to bring about the changes that we need to do. That was Friday. On Saturday, the teachers, what do you call it here, near to the Pegasus,
I don't know.
The teachers, the teachers training college had a graduation.
Right.
And White announced that graduation, private schools could be reestablished.
Okay.
For Ghana.
Okay.
And everybody that was there knows how it came about. And on Monday, Carl Benitez was the Minister of Finance. And I remember in a very small article in the papers, I think it was on the same Monday after, all computer hardware will be free of all taxes.
Zero rated.
Zero rated.
Stanley, telling us the stories of your interactions with both the late Dr. Jagan and President Hoyt, you're outlining a certain model, a certain image of leadership which is required. And tell me if I'm wrong. Firstly, competence. Secondly,
Statesmanship.
I say patriotism. And also a lack of vindictiveness and a willingness to bring people together and to hear multiple voices, even if those voices aren't part of your normal milieu. You've been around the system for long. Is that a good outline of what the sort of leadership we need for 2030 and beyond?
Yep, I remember one day, because after Hoyt lost the election, he and I used to pick him up every morning at 5:30 and go walking to the seawall because he had a health issue.
Right.
And that's where I learned about the political history of Guyana.
Okay.
6 days a week, he and I walked from Camp Street all the way up to the Russian embassy, and then he went back home. I used to pick him up in my car. And that's when I learned a lot about the history of the politics of Guyana from the days of Burnham and Cheddi Jagan and all of that, right? And I said to him one day, I said, how do you see Dr. Jagan as the new president of Guyana? He said, Stanley, I will support him in every way I can.
Right.
I always remember that. That was his position.
But I think a lot of people would point out to this thing like the Mo Fire episode, etc. I mean, where does all that sort of stuff fit into?
Well, you remember the Mo Fire came in after Dr. Jagan died.
Ah, okay.
And the conditions of the politics of Guyana
had changed.
Radical. I don't need to explain that.
So you keep not explaining certain critical things. So effectively, what I hear you saying is that the sort of changes which occurred in the post Jagan era ushered in a new politics in Guyana.
Absolutely.
A politics which wasn't necessarily inclusive, a politics which wasn't necessarily collegial.
But I don't need to comment because every guy needs to know more than I do about that. I don't need to comment.
Stanley, we're getting towards the end, and our host hasn't had a chance to offer any points of views. Prof, do you want to step in quickly?
No. I think the conversation has been flowing really beautifully, and I've been really enjoying. What the conversation you guys have been having. So, I'm going to not step on toes and let you guys continue, and maybe I'll say a few thoughts at the end.
Well, all I want to say once again, Stanley, is that this hasn't been long enough, and as someone who benefits in private from your conversations, I know there's much more to say. And we certainly want to get you in again to focus on specific things. But this has been an amazing travel through from drainage to Gaisuco to immigration and to constitutional reform and the nature of leadership. I really want to thank you again for allowing us to step into your space. Is there anything you want to say as before Prof sums up?
Kojo, all I want to say here is that we need to embrace the brain power of our young people. Mm-hmm. India, before the turn of the century, got all the students of the universities in India to come together with young leaders and people who have a good knowledge of the history, and they wrote the book, Vision 2020, which is what India should be by the year 2020 and how we should get there. What we need to do is to take all the young people we have out of the University of Guyana, whether they've graduated or about to graduate, say to them, give us the vision of the future of Guyana to the year 2050. Let them map it out. And I tell you something, they know a lot more than my generation.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Right? They will make us look very, very poor in terms of capability. And that's what we need.
Danny, thanks again. Prof, I'm gonna leave the challenging task of summarizing this to you. But I think as we approach the elections on September the 1st, Stanley left us with an idea around the sort of leadership we need to take us beyond 2030, which I think is very powerful and very important. It's about inclusion. It's about giving free rein to talent. And I know it's something you and I speak a lot about. And also ensuring that people feel included. And I think that's one of the great things about competent and confident leadership. It allows the talent to float to the top. But please, summarize for us.
Well, Stanley and Kojo, I really think that your conversation today has been a, if I might say so, a masterclass in national reimagination. I think from the beginning you've sort of walked us through, granular challenges, clogged drainage canals in Georgetown, declining sugar fields, and I think at the same time you've sort of lifted our gaze to a larger vision of Guyana, of what Guyana could become. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. That the narrative can't be just about problems, but it's got to be about the possibilities. And I think that you've shown us how these, technical challenges like drainage is sort of are really metaphors for larger and broader sort of systemic issues: lawlessness, lack of coordination, absence of a collective vision. Yet, I think we talked about this at the beginning. There's a path forward. There's an expertise-driven path forward. Strategic immigration, agricultural diversification, and most critically, I think, as you guys have come to the end, that kind of politics of inclusion. And I think that those lessons that you just drew from your experiences with Jagan and Hoyt, I think illustrate the kind of transformative leadership that really can't be just about ideological positions, but really about listening, adapting, bringing in diverse voices into a shared national project. And that's one of the things that I think we've tried to catalyze. So, I think your vision suggests Guyana isn't just a country with potential, but you've suggested a potential blueprint for developing, Guyana's resources in a thoughtful manner that really leads to, full actualization of the Guyanese potential. So I want to, again, the message has been coming to me about, like, this has been a breath of fresh air, just listening to you. So I think you have a big audience there. When I put this out earlier, someone suggested that you should be running for political office, but you fixed this already. So we'll just be happy with having the insight in this context. So thank you very much. Thank you to all the folks who've joined us this evening. It's been a genuine pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. See you again in a fortnight.
Yeah, it's been a genuine pleasure. It's wonderful, a really wonderful conversation. Let me end the stream. Yeah.